Hello, Jane.
Hello, sweetie. How are you?
Yes, I'm as as expected one could be, but I'm good. Yes, thank you.
Well, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Hi, Susie.
Good evening. Hello. Hi, Jean. Hi, Tracy. Hi,
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
everybody
else.
Just making sure I've got everybody in that's here. Hi, Janice. Sorry, I couldn't see you behind the participants. Have a sunny Easter. Apart from Monday. I think Monday was pretty grim everywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah. Cold.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't cold. It was freezing.
We had driving snow all afternoon here.
No. Oh, yesterday we had snow. No.
No. Well, it's gone now.
Yeah. And how was the detox over Easter?
I'm just going to be honest, non-existent.
Yeah.
I have to confess to having a few carob buttons.
Sorry?
I have to confess to having a few carob buttons, but they don't have any sugar in.
Carob is fine. Yeah. No, I resisted all sugar, or chocolate, I should say. So
I've not had any chocolate. No.
Yeah. Really, but you know.
Chocolate, but I've had some bread.
There's Jane.
I had some rye bread yesterday because I was really, really hungry. I just thought, what can I eat? You know, something. So I had that.
Well, we've got lovely new moon coming up on April the 12th.
I thought it was the 10th, Susie. I thought it was the 10th. I thought the new moon was the 10th. I could be wrong.
I'll check for you. Hang on a sec. Thought it was the 12th.
Oh, it's the 12th. It is the
12th.
Yes, sorry. It's when I go to Kent. Or when I go down south. It's the new moon because I was looking at when I'm travelling. Sorry.
Oh,
mistake. Yes.
That's fine. It's new moon in Aries, of course, which rules the head. And an Aries moon is also a good time in the month to start a new habit, and a new moon is a great time to start a new habit. So it's a new moon in Aries, so it's a doubly great time to
that's it then.
There's hope for us still then, isn't there?
Hope, absolutely. Hope for
you start. You start.
There we go. So let me see. We're 10 at the moment, so I think there is just one person. Oh, it's Sonia. Yes, who may join us later, I think.
Whilst we're waiting, can I just ask about spelt?
Yes.
Is spelt flour, as opposed to wheat flour, an okay thing to use? I bought a packet of whole grain spelt flour to make some like naan breads for my daughter. And I don't know whether it is all right or not.
You mean for the detox?
Well, just generally to cook with. I mean, obviously, normally I avoid wheat all the time. I haven't over Easter, but normally I do. But I'm not sure where spelt stands.
It's got about 60% less gluten than modern wheats, and it doesn't have the modified gliadin gene insert or protein inserted into it, but it is, it still does have some gluten, so it'll still have, you know, the gluten that's in it will still have that inflammatory effect if you are prone to inflammation from it. So that's the unfortunate thing about it, but it's so much softer because it's got less proteins in it than the sort of durum wheats, but not great for a detox prep at the moment. Yeah. So tonight I'm going to go back to Gut Flora, and I know that you've been there before, many of you, but there's so much more research coming out about Gut Flora and the effects that it has on health and how different it is at different stages of our life. But I thought it'd be really good to have a look at that and then recap the foods that will nourish it, and also have a look at some herbs and things as well, and see what else you can bring in. So I'd first just like to say thank you to everyone. And then I'd really love to leave it at that. And thank you so much. Right, so I will grab the screen, because one of the reasons that, I'm adding new slides, sorry, just bear with me a second. One of the reasons that I wanted to include Flora again in this is because they help, this mouse, they help detoxification, and there are ways that we can support them to encourage detoxification. And I've put, when I did this presentation, I put one wind-inducing Jerusalem artichoke at a time, and I hadn't had any for a little while because I haven't dug any up out of the garden, and there were still about 3 rows in my back garden. But when I was down here, we went out to get some bits and pieces to cook, and everybody is taking it in turns here at the moment, and I made that artichoke mash that I don't know if any of you have had a go at yet.
No.
And I ate rather a double quantity of it at lunchtime. Had to sit in a different room to everybody else that evening time to time because the wind was so horrendous. But I think it was because my niece had cooked a curry in the evening as well. So what with that and the artichokes, it was that's loud, is what I will say. It was only that, but they wondered how such a small person could produce so much wind. But it did create a nice amount of hilarity. So, so human microbial populations were obviously far more diverse and far more different number and variety before we became, before we started producing our own food agriculturally. And so because we had no access to running water, we lived much more active lives, much more in the outdoors. We had to actually sort of be hunter-gatherers and go off and get what we were looking for. And because we didn't have the same level of probably hygiene and sanitation that we do now, our microbial population would have been much greater, particularly because of things like eating with your fingers as well, and not having perhaps washed your hands before you did anything as well. So at the same time as perhaps being exposed to more bacteria that might have caused infection, we also had bacteria available to us that would protect us from that infection. Because, you know, there is that thing where they say you have to eat a peck of dirt before you die. You have to, you know, as a child, it's best that everything isn't sanitized, because you will have available to you a greater microbial population that you can strengthen your immune system with. And obviously that just doesn't happen anymore. And the other thing that would have been true is that our diets would have been so much higher, both in fibre and in microbes, you know, possibly because of the way we prepared them and the conditions that we prepared them in. But our microbiome is like a fingerprint on our body, or our own face. It is absolutely unique to us, and it varies with particularly, of course, what your mum had available to colonise you with as you were born, the method of your birth, your gender, what your mum ate, and then what you ate as an infant and then a young adult, the climate that you lived in, your age. They've discovered that our microbiome changes at different stages of our life. What we had as an occupation, our own levels of hygiene, we were exposed to animals or not. So whether we had pets in the house would make a difference to our microbiome. Whether we had, perhaps we lived on a farm, or whether we lived locally to farm animals. And things like the weather and the local soil would all have an influence on our own microbiome. So what they know is that when babies are born naturally, their mother's vaginal bacterial community will help start giving the baby their microbiome beginning. And so following our birth, with breastfeeding and the environment that the baby's brought up in, that colonization continues. And this is why it's so important that, you know, in an ideal situation, babies are breastfed, because mum will give an enormous amount of microbes to the baby during that. And then, of course, once the baby starts putting things in their mouth, whether it be food or whatever is in their environment, and my goodness, do they put a lot of things in their mouth. From the age of 6 months to 3 years, their species increase to about 100. But by the time we're adults, we have about 1,000 species populating the gut. And they have changing functions as well. So whereas babies have folate producing microbes, adults also have folate harvesting microbes as well, which would additionally pick up from what's in the diet. And so one of the things that's really important about your gut flora is that if you have a healthy population, they can also produce some of your B vitamins, many of your B vitamins, and particularly folate, and also some of your B12. So if you can imagine as well, also serotonin, and I'm going to come back to serotonin a bit later. So as we, as women, go from puberty, possibly experience pregnancy, go to menopause. Puberty can affect skin microbes, and we do have microbes not just in the gut, but literally all over the inside of the body, and particularly in larger populations in some areas outside the body. And so because puberty affects the oiliness of the skin, it also affects the microbes on our skin at that time. Pregnancy affects particularly vaginal microbes and the colonization of those in order to benefit the baby being born. But it's really important, if we can, before and during menopause, to look after our gut health, because our microbiome plays a role in the circulation of estrogens. And those estrogens contribute to both a healthy and diverse gut flora, and that in turn helps keep your gut barrier strong. So it helps prevent a leaky gut. And unfortunately, menopause can disrupt that process and the interplay between estrogen and your gut flora. And as estrogen levels decline, that can have quite an impact on your gut flora and the balance between your healthy and unhealthy bacteria. And I've got a little chart to show you so that you can have a look in a minute. And so what they've found is that the relationship between your gut flora and lack of estrogens can be a contributory factor for weight gain during menopause. But one of the tricky things is that can also be due to whether your liver is able to metabolize any excess estrogens that are there. And I know I've probably mentioned a lot of you that as well. So it's sort of a bit of whether it's the chicken or the egg first. And also they've done research studies that have linked the gut to various aspects of bone health and your ability to metabolize calcium as well. And it's thinking about how your ability to metabolize the minerals that you consume, and using the gut flora in particular to do that. So particularly in the large gut, we would absorb back most of our magnesium and potassium there rather than before in the small intestine. And so it's thinking about the gut flora that are populating each area and how they're supporting our absorption and metabolism. Oh, now this, unfortunately, we are in the way a bit. And what I'd like to was going to compare first of all that large blue area at the bottom, because it shows you the abundance. And when you're able to see the chart on the slide handout, you'll be able, and I will send last week's and this week's together. I do apologise, I seem to be having trouble downloading here. Is that you've got a population, the largest population is lactobacillus, and pre-menopause, I don't know if you can see that with my mouse, because my mouse is not going to play ball. This one here, it's almost at half the amount post-menopause, possibly due to those changes in estrogens. And some of your what might be termed bad bacteria, like this blue one here, could increase if the environment is not correct. And just the general population of good gut flora can go down. So it's really helpful to keep the diet right so that we can support those good gut flora. And of course, they can have a huge impact on our mood and well-being, particularly connected with serotonin. And so Hippocrates, like he said, what was his other thing? You are what you eat. He also said all disease begins in the gut, and that, you know, that's about 2,500 years ago, and that, you know, he knew that already. So I don't know whether he knew it was your little microbes, but he knew that it was hugely important. And so if you like a cow and the grass that they eat, we have a huge co-evolutionary relationship with our microbes. And if you think about a cow and the fact that it then produces these great big cow pats, these cow pats then nourish the ground and therefore the grass that the cow will then later eat once all of that has rotted down. And so they have a symbiotic relationship, if you like, with the land that they live on by nourishing it with their feces, and then the plants will flourish that they can eat again. And so our microbes have this lovely relationship with us. We benefit from them and they benefit from us. And the fascinating thing is that microbes throughout the whole of the body outnumber our human cells 1-to-1. Now, depending on which anatomy and physiology book you read, your human cells are about 1 trillion. And so if you can imagine, I don't know what that, you know, would mean in terms of microbes, but it does mean that 90% of all the little cells that live in our body are technically non-human. And so those microbial cells are such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea and protozoa. Don't ask me too much about them because I'm not totally entirely sure what kind of a cell they are, but they all have a metabolic role to play, or metabolic roles to play, and protective roles to play. And the fascinating thing that just the bacteria in your gut weighs about 3 pounds, about the same
Wow.
weight as your brain.
Wow. More bacteria than we are human.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it always reminds me of that Linus in Snoopy, you know, where he's sort of got a little dust ball around him. It always makes me think that we're a little bit like that. We're sort of more microbes than we are human cells. But just looking at the areas where you have, you know, a greater, externally where you have a greater number of microbes flourishing, obviously your gut and your nasal cavity internally, but then you've got also your hair follicles, your armpits, your skin, all over, and your groin. You have more microbes in. When you think about it, particularly your armpits and your groin are, you know, said to be the warmest parts of the body, obviously, and so obviously anything would flourish there. So just thinking about our relationship with flora and fauna, but these microbes, I thought it was worth mentioning Streptococcus because normally they are part of the bacteria that you have in your nose at, you know, any one time in a healthy state. But if they migrate to the throat, or if they start to proliferate in the throat rather than in the nose, they can actually contribute to sore throats, or strep throat as they call it, things like tonsillitis can get flamed up. And it's a case of thinking about some of your bacteria. They might be bad in the wrong place, but they are also possibly useful and good, have a useful role to play in the right place. So it's not that they're, you could think of Streptococcus as a bad bacteria. Actually, it's not. It's only a bad bacteria when it's in the wrong part of the body. Excuse me. And so thinking about that symbiotic role, a symbiont is a beneficial microorganism, and it's a case of you pat my back and I'll pat yours, in that, creating the right relationship is of great mutual benefit to both of us. And there's one here with a very long name that I will have a go at pronouncing, Bacteroides theta iota omicron, and it's a glycobiome that contains the greatest number of genes capable of metabolizing carbohydrates. And we need those microbes. They're required for the metabolism and synthesis of both our macronutrients, so such as our proteins, our carbs and our fats, and also all of our micronutrients like our minerals and our vitamins. And so this particular one that I've mentioned will help us digest carbohydrates. And so if we don't have those available, then we're going to have many more struggles breaking down some of our large nutrients and micronutrients. And they've done a lot of research relating to diabetes and obesity in relation to microbes. And what they found is that where there are the wrong ratios of gut microbiota or dysbiosis in the gut with a typical Western diet, and then you consider the other age, the other factors we might have, like our age, our lifestyle, the genetics we're born in with, what antibiotic usage we've had over the years, and they can affect what genes we're able to host, and they can also create, if they get to great numbers in negative microbiome, then create chronic inflammation, which can lead to a number of chronic illness, even more so than diabetes and obesity, any that you might think of as chronic illness. And so a study that they did with 123 non-obese and 169 obese Danish people, they found that people with low amounts of healthy bacteria had much less adiposity, much less ability or greater propensity to put on weight. They were able to have stronger insulin resistance, their fat metabolism was better, and they had less inflammation. Whereas people with low amounts of healthy bacteria had all those problems to a greater degree. And they found that it was easier also for those people with low gut flora to put on even more weight over time. But if you can imagine, when you're not properly metabolizing your food, you are far more likely to gain weight because you simply will not be metabolizing nutrients in the way that you need to in order to clear their wastes from the body either. So even pathogenic organisms have benefit from us, but they're the problematic ones that can cause disease if the population gets too big. And it's one of those things where if they're only in small amounts, they aren't necessarily damaging. But for example, you'll have all have heard of Helicobacter pylori, which can cause inflammation, damage the inner lining of your stomach, contribute to lymphoma, leading cause of stomach cancer as well. And the thing is that if you have the right environment in the gut, that will not flourish in the first place in any case. But certainly, if you can imagine, it can have a role in inhibiting the development of acid reflux and esophageal cancer. And so it's a real catch-22, whereas if you create the right environment, then you will have the right amounts of all the bacteria that we need. So dysbiosis, or that pathogenic environment in the gut, can cause all of the chronic illness listed here, and obesity. And one of you probably have possibly have seen in the last few years that gut flora dysbiosis has been associated with depression. And what I'd like to mention, or re-mention again at this point, is the production of serotonin, because 80 to 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that contributes to our well-being and a feeling of serenity. And it also helps our sleep. So because serotonin helps you make melatonin, which contributes to good sleep, as produced from the pineal. And so if we don't have the ability to make that because our gut flora are poor, then it's really going to impact very heavily on sleep. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. Don't know what I did there. I think my mouse had moved and right. So I know a lot of you eat these vegetables before, and I hope you'll forgive a reminder. The one in the middle is Jerusalem artichokes, and I can vouch that they are wonderful at producing a good prebiotic sugars in them are fabulous at feeding your gut flora, because they really do feed their resistant starch and sugars to your gut flora. And it's actually that feeding of your gut flora that can create quite a bit of wind. So we should have a bit of wind, but the thing about it is that it shouldn't be strong smelling. It should just be wind, if that makes sense. And so because if you can imagine, if it starts to get very strong smelling even, then there's too much fermentation of the wrong kind in the gut, and things sitting there too long, fermenting in a negative way. And what we really need is wind that is quite productive. It's because your flora are busy working because they've been fed the right food. And I'm trying to think of, maybe you could think of it as like little fish in a tank blowing bubbles as they're swimming around, if that's an analogy for it. And And so, of course, onions and garlic and leeks are absolutely fabulous. Garlic in particular, you know, if you're brave enough to include a clove or two that is raw in your salad or your juice, and you're not seeing many people on that day, you know, or certainly not people that don't mind a bit of second-hand garlic anyway, then because I have a lovely acupuncturist and homeopath, the very first one that I ever saw in my life at the age of 19, and I can remember seeing him and saying, "Oh, I'm awfully sorry, Nelson, I've got terribly garlicky breath today," and he said, "Don't worry," he says, "I like it second hand and first hand," and I can never eat garlic without thinking of that. So radishes are also fabulous. So a lovely thing to chop into your salads as well. These veggies are really high in prebiotics that feed your gut flora. And then you've got veggies, of course, that are quite carbohydrate high. So you would, you know, it's nice to include them, but not to quite such a large degree. And so you've got things like your parsnips, your carrots, sweet potatoes, beetroot are lovely, celeriac is lovely, salsify, horseradish, which I'll probably mention again. All of those are fabulous to, you know, maybe include and rotate so that, you know, you're getting different prebiotic sugars from different ones, which will feed different gut flora for you. This is a lovely thing about having a diet with such variety, which is it's the different variety of sugars that will feed the different gut flora. So where if we, and I mean root veg like potatoes, obviously potatoes are also a source of prebiotic sugars, but then it's that thing, if we eat them every day, if we're eating white potatoes day in day out, we're only feeding the same gut flora. And so looking at fruits, these ones are lovely for prebiotic sugars. Green apples in particular rather than red. They're more tarty, less sweet. More of your original apples are the green, sort of slightly tarty tasting apples, and they are the ones to focus on rather than the red. If you have crabapple in the garden, green crab apples rather than red crab apples are a lovely source. And my goodness, are they tarty. Things like lemons and limes, again, are a good source of prebiotic sugars. And again, you can taste that bitterness. And I'm going to come back to digestive bitterness in a minute, and, you know, herbal bitters. Now, bananas, obviously, they are very, very sweet. And so something to stick to a half of, you know, share with somebody else. Blueberries are absolutely lovely for prebiotic sugars as well. And then thinking about foods like asparagus and Brussels sprouts, because again, I apologise for mentioning all of these before to those of you who've, you know, we've looked at gut flora before, but worth always having another look at. Asparagus and Brussels sprouts are high in soluble and insoluble fibre, and the fibres that we eat are really lovely for your gut flora. So all vegetables are your very best friend because they are all high in different kinds of fibre. These two in particular I've mentioned first of all are high in soluble fibre, and that dissolves in the water that you're using to digest your foods, and it's easily digested by your gut flora because it forms a kind of gel. So it's thinking about things like your linseed tea, which has that gel that has been, you know, taken up from the fibre. It's thinking about things like aloe vera, things like chia seeds that have been soaked. When you soak your other seeds and nuts, if you're going to do that, things like your pulses and your legumes, all of those kind of things, when you soak them, are a lovely source of this fibre and that kind of gel. And so insoluble fibre is also needed because it helps the pace at which your feces go through the gut, and all of your food travels through the gut. And so things like cabbage and celery are a lovely source of insoluble fibre. And you know, from when you're eating things like the cabbage family, like kale, and how tough the stalks are, and what kind of a lot of chewing they require. And celery, of course, you know, all that fibre down the spines. But I always encourage people to just take a little bit of that off, so it's not too stringy. Otherwise, you'll be chewing for days. And then, of course, you've got your fermented foods, and we don't need masses and masses of fermented food. So about a tablespoon a day, you know, maybe a quarter of a pint of things like, oh gosh, what are those blooming Scoobies called? The one in the centre. Can anybody help me with this? Oh gosh. Anybody ever grown
kombucha? The kombucha.
Kombucha. Thank you so much. Yes, that's the one. And so, yes, the kombucha. And then you've got things like your sauerkraut and your kimchi, and even things when they're properly prepared, things like gherkins and that kind of thing. If they've been properly fermented, you know, small cucumbers. And then you've got things that can be very helpful against the bad bacteria proliferating. I'm going to mention a few of those I haven't necessarily got up here. Now, horseradish is one of them, and horseradish is something that you could maybe stir into your beetroot, your fresh beetroot, if you grate it, and then, or chop it, and then stir a dessert spoon of horseradish into it. I mean, obviously, if you can get it raw, so much the better, because that's better still than the ones that you buy in the shops. And also things like thyme are absolutely fabulous for preventing the bad bacteria proliferating, and things like cumin seeds. Now, they contain thymol, which is something that stimulates bile flow from the liver, which helps your liver detox process, and they lower gas formation, particularly cumin lowers gas formation in the gut. And then you've got things like dandelion greens and digestive bitters. So bitter herbs like chamomile, for example. And what the bitter herbs do, and things like dandelion greens are, they increase your gastric secretions, they decrease your gastric motility, but they increase blood circulation to the gut. And those three things, the slowing down, but yet stimulation of gastric secretions, so things are held in one place a little bit longer before their next muscular contraction, means that that optimizes nutrient breakdown, because you're taking just slightly longer to digest something and extract more from it, better extraction. And it also means that because the gastric motility is slightly slower, it slows the rate at which sugars or glucose enter your bloodstream from the food that you've got digesting in your gut. And that means that you don't get such a blood sugar hit from what you're eating. So including herbs like thyme, in a meal, particularly where you've got some root vegetables, for example. So thinking about maybe not chives in a potato salad, put a little bit of thyme in, or maybe a little bit of cumin or some whole cumin seeds, and add those in as well. What I'll do is I'll send out a list of the digestive herbs as well, the digestive bitter herbs, so you can think about including some of those. So the lovely thing about including something on gut flora is that gut flora help your body detoxify your waste, because not only are they helping break down some of the toxins that come into your gut and taking the pressure off liver, they're also helping detoxify things like heavy metals. And in terms of detoxifying heavy metals, the thing I will mention is coriander, because that can be very helpful at detoxifying heavy metals. But then in general, for gut flora aiding detoxification, things that can really help them out, things like ginger, because it's a natural antibiotic and it sort of demotes again your bad bacteria from flourishing, as does garlic, same way. And then we've had a chat about the bitterness of bitters and dandelion greens, and why cumin and thyme are helpful. Sorry, that was a bit heavy going. Anything you'd like to ask me?
I would want to ask about liquid herbs, ones you can get from like a list, and they might give you a little selection. Mixing them all together, do you think that, I'm just looking for mine, do you think that's a bit challenging for the gut, or just have a little bit more often? Can you find it now?
Yeah, do you mean like milk thistle or something?
I mean, like you go and see a herbalist and they give you like a big bottle.
Yes, right.
And
yeah.
Can't find it now. I've got one with digestive herbs in. And I was thinking, maybe I should start that here and there. Because I had it at the time and then just forgot all about it. Trying to find it.
So, yes, I think it probably is a good idea to split it out a bit.
Yeah, and stop it.
It's a little bit like your fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut. Little and often is really helpful, but you can overdo it.
Yeah, and what about, I know this is not as perhaps, but soy sauce or tamari, because that's fermented soybean, isn't it? Like tamari, gluten-free tamari.
In terms of gut flora, you mean?
Yeah, it's not really great for it, is it? They often have alcohol in, don't they? Soybeans, water, sea salt, alcohol.
Is that a tamari? That one you've got there?
Yeah. It's
yes, that's a good question. Yes, it is better if they don't.
yeah.
Just trying to think.
I suppose it's fermented soybeans, and some of them, and buy really expensive ones that are fermented over a long time, special caskets. You can just buy box tamari.
That's right.
But I imagine they sort of like alcohols in anyway.
Yeah, they will be simply preserved. But
I've got another one there. Soybean sea salt mirin.
It usually affects more amount if it is in. Mostly they use salt, so if I suppose one reason for using alcohol might be so that you use less salt.
Yeah, so that tamari is probably a better one. That's a gluten-free clear spring tamari soy salt, and that's got salt, soy mirin, and cultured rice, sweet rice, cold white rice.
Yes.
But it has in.
Yes, because that's isn't mirin a form of is it a rice wine or something?
Yes, the sweet rice water. Yeah.
And so the ideal is that it's a sea salt and that it's as small a quantity as possible.
Yes.
And used as sparingly as possible. And liquid aminos is another one, of course, that doesn't actually have salt added.
Oh, right. So that like the Bragg's aminos.
Yes, yeah. Finding that.
Yeah, I read something bad about once and then it put me off, but actually it's probably better than the soy sauce.
Yeah.
I can't remember what
it's a fermented one again.
Something, you read something helpful that puts you off for like 6 months. But actually it's pretty more helpful than what you would have had anyway. I can't remember.
Yeah. I think that's the case. And if you're only having a little, hello Sonia.
Hi.
Any other questions?
Susie, I have a question. You were mentioning about a bacteria being in the wrong place in the body and then becoming harmful because it's about where it resides. And you were talking about if you move nasal bacteria to the throat, for example, then that could be, not very pleasant. You could get ill or what have you. I'm just thinking about obviously the self-testing that is going on, and wondering about transferring from throat to nose, whether there's or just your thoughts in general about repeatedly touching the very delicate mucous membranes at the top of the nose on a really regular basis, because I'm quite concerned about doing that on a really long-term, regular basis. I've had doubts about it for a long time, but just wondered what you thought about the first point and also generally with that.
Actually, it's not so much that you move them from your nose to your throat. It's that there will be a particular environment in your throat, because your esophagus being part of your digestive tract very close to the back of your throat, that if there is a certain environment proliferating, that is what contributes to those, there will only be small amounts there, but if the environment's right, then it can increase in that area where it's not supposed to be.
Right.
And that is what contributes to the sore throat, because it inflames those particular mucous membranes, because your mucous membranes are different and have different roles in each part of your body.
Yeah.
And so they have their own types of bacteria that are supposed to be there in larger numbers.
But if you're swabbing the back of your throat,
but swabbing
and then shoving it up your nose, you're effectively transferring something from your throat to the top of your nose, aren't you?
Do you actually use the same swab tip then? Oh, right.
Yeah, you do one. It's tiny, and you do both tonsils.
Yes.
4 times on each side, and then you shove it up and then whiz it round.
Wow.
Obviously, yeah.
No, that's really interesting, isn't it? I had no
Do you have to do that?
Well, no, but there's what can I? It's highly recommended, and there's a lot of yes, basically.
So it's recommended for everybody, or just recommended for schools?
If you're in education, but they're now saying that they're rolling it out to everybody, that you're going to just pick up free tests so that you can do it, whatever living you earn, wherever you go.
Reduction of single-use plastics, I mean, that's going to cost billions.
Yeah,
literally billions.
It's probably some private company that somebody knows in the government, expect, but anyway.
It's interesting actually, because I didn't realise that was the case, Tracy, but my sister just came back from France this week because of the circumstances, and we were talking about the swabs that she had to do.
Yes.
And, I said to her, because she will have to do it again apparently, that she should give her nose a really good blow and also go onto a handkerchief and then dip the swab into
that's a good idea.
and then send that back.
Yes.
Now you might think I'm
teapot, you know, like
absolute heretic, to which I do apologise, but I feel that that is a healthier way to get the fluid that you require, a sample that you require from deep here and back here. But it's just a thought. I didn't say it. But yes, I do feel that to poke even a sterilised medium into
and I just wonder what it actually tells you, because some people say, you know, they've sent ones back that have actually not even been used and they've come back positive.
Oh yeah,
and others tested
there's
cans of Coke and things, so you just don't know.
No.
I think
hopefully they'll get rid of that idea, because it does sound rather preposterous.
It's really invasive.
But the thing is, it's like anything, they come up with an idea and then they roll with it for weeks and weeks. And if you don't watch the news and then turn it on about a week and a half later, it's still the same thing being rolled out. And it's like, some of it seems quite preposterous, to be honest. It's just the way it is, isn't it?
I think we're quite unusual, because you're in the Isle of Man, aren't you, Heidi?
Yes, but man usually follows the UK. So, I mean, they usually find out what the UK are going to do. And it's like this ridiculous thing about passport. And they're like, well, we're not going to have one at the moment, but if the UK insists on having one, then we will respond quickly. I mean, if they've got everybody vaccinated, then surely they should, or everybody they want to, then they shouldn't be concerned about it. I don't know. I mean, I think all governments all follow this, don't they? It seems to be like a global alliance, and if you're not in it, then you get a black mark.
You go to hell.
You get killed.
It's just this thing about the mucous membranes. That's all. That's what kind of interests me, and how delicate and how vital a role they play. And if you're ever poking about with it, surely you're going to make yourself more vulnerable to.
Well, you could actually insert germs in. You could put germs in, couldn't you? So it's not completely sterile. Yeah, it's interesting. I know somebody who said that they'd recommend wash the back of their nose out with the neti pot. You know, like they do the yoga things. They do that. But I don't know what salt water would do.
Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Oh, I had another question about fermentation too. If anybody hasn't got one.
About fermentation, did you say?
Yeah. So like you can do like fermented beetroot dip or fermented sauerkraut. It can actually, if you don't do it right and you haven't got the jar sterile, it can actually be toxic, can't it?
It can, yes. But you can usually tell, fortunately, because it smells disgusting.
Oh, really?
It tastes disgusting.
Oh, that's good to know.
And it usually has a nice collection of mold growing on it as well.
Oh, okay, good. Because I did make some ferment and it was really nice. And then I thought, well, how can it continue fermenting for? Now I've opened it and used it once. Does it have to go in the bin? And I got a little bit kind of overly worried about it, but then I didn't want to take the risk because I wasn't too sure if you could tell, like you say, if it's off, so to speak.
Yes, you can usually tell quite easily.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. And if you're
Great.
unsure, just taste a tiny amount, and that will usually.
And if it's really sour, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Susie, I'm just interested about this business of how antibiotics and taking those can actually affect your gut flora. Particularly because I had a conversation lately, and I've mentioned to you before how my daughter's digestive system has been dreadful, and she was saying she thinks she can pinpoint it to when she was about 11 or 12, and she'd got a horrendous fungal infection down below. But at that she didn't tell me, and when I saw it, it was just horrendous.
Yes.
It's like a huge scab all in her pubic hair, which was took her to the doctor, and the doctor put her on antibiotics and it cleared it up.
Yes.
But she says she thinks that is when her digestive problems started.
Absolutely.
And for years and years, until about 4 or 5 years ago, when she went to a kinesiologist who said you're allergic or you're dairy intolerant, and she's been a lot better since. But if she then at that stage did lose some essential gut flora and it's not replenished, I'm wondering if we traced her medical records and knew what antibiotics she was given then, could we do something about it? Or am I getting a bit too scientific here?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's purposeful, but I absolutely would probably agree with her in that you can imagine if something fungal is proliferating in the body, it's because those fungus have the right environment to grow in.
Yeah.
And so then there's two factors here at play. One is that generally fungal infections, whether they're vaginal, whether they're on your feet, athlete's foot, whether they're on your skin, ringworm, something like that, they are simply the resulting discharge from your body due to that fungal activity. And the fungal activity is a sign that the internal gut flora isn't happy, if that makes sense, because the environment's wrong. So then if you suppress those with antibiotics and you say to the skin or the vagina or the toes, right, stop that nonsense, I'm not having you producing a discharge to the outside of my body or to an area that is not inside an organ, if you like, because you can actually get fungal growths in the heart, for example, and so that's obviously far more serious than having a fungal activity on the skin and so on. And so if you then suppress that with antibiotics, unfortunately, antibiotics not only kill your bad bacteria, they also, and fungal activity, they also clear your good flora. And so, as well as anything else, they have quite an impact on the village aim, which is the most significant thing in terms of allergies, which is that strong antibiotics and you know, a course of antibiotics will knock the villi flat in the small intestine. It really, they're quite detrimental to them. And if those villi aren't able to repair and recover and stand back up again, you get a very similar picture to someone with celiacs.
Right.
Where they simply are unable to digest gluten. And so particularly then where someone had repeated doses of antibiotics, that in itself can create a celiac type picture.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So to repair that, would you just have to have a really good probiotic, prebiotic, or a mixture of the two? Because you can spend lots of money. You can spend like £50 on a really good one, but how if your digestive system is struggling?
Yeah, and the first place
How
to
do you
start really
Yeah.
is not with probiotics, because okay, so you've got all those lovely millions of bacteria there. Thanks, Jean. See you soon. You've got all those lovely probiotics in the capsule, but if you haven't got the environment inside yet for them to grow in, it's an absolute waste of money, because you know you can't grow a cactus in a swamp. You've got to create the right environment first, really, and then put the bacteria in. And I'm not saying don't put any in ever.
Reduce the inflammatory foods.
Yes, it's reducing the inflammatory foods and the foods that are going to keep the gut in a state of inflammation, because the gut inflammation in itself from foods like gluten particularly, and to a certain extent dairy for some people, is going to hold the gut in a state of inflammation.
Would it be at that point then, Susie, once you've got more of a balance, which hopefully we'll have got marvellously after we've done our juicing and vegan and everything, then that will be the time then to start looking at a herbal antifungal plus probiotics, or herbal antifungal first, then probiotics late? You know, is it better to get this balance first and then look at other things, you know, if the symptoms are still there, say in the case of Candida?
Yes, it is. And so to work with the environment first and then put the supplementation in, and possibly things like maybe some digestive bitters, the herbs that will feed the good gut flora and improve metabolism environment generally, rather than something that is going to be killing off your gut flora, the bad gut flora, because killing off your bad bacteria, if they're there in the environment that they're in, killing them won't change the environment.
No.
So it's thinking that changing that environment can take at least 6 months.
Yes.
At least 6 months. Yeah. So it's patience.
Got it.
Really is the thing.
Got it. Yeah, that's brilliant.
And that's one of the hardest things, really.
Yeah. But we're starting this at the right time of year, because it's much easier to do this stuff in the summer anyway, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I had Candida in my gut, and it took me about a year to actually change it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because I kept kind of like dropping the bandwagon and having the odd whatever it was, you know, like, until I actually completely cleared all the foods out. Then when I did that, I thought, oh my gosh, I feel like a cloud's lifted off my head and I can actually think more clearly. It was amazing. But unless I'd done that, yeah. And I remember somebody asking me, I think I was in Australia, and I popped into this, like, they all had natural in the pharmacy and in the chemist. So, and I had this consultation with him, and he said, "Oh, I think you've got candida." And I said, "No, I haven't got thrush." And he was like, "Well, no, you got." And I thought,
yeah.
"Do you crave sugar?" And I was like, "No." And then I thought about it. I just walked about half a mile up this hill to get this really nice cake I'd seen, and I kept thinking about this cake. I thought, maybe I have.
Yeah.
And then he was asking me what I'd eaten, and it was like where I was staying, they were drinking wine, eating pizza, there was like sandwiches, there was cereal, bread and stuff. And I was like, there's actually quite a lot of yeast going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took a while, and then I realized it was in everything
Yeah.
well, everything that I was eating at the time. Yeah, but it's only when you start checking the packets that you really get into it.
I'm a right packet checker now. Trouble is, my eyes are going, so I'm doing that. Oh, where's the light thing?
I was just doing that with the soy sauce.
I'm even thinking of investing in a magnifying glass that I can keep in my handbag.
Cheap glasses you get in Poundland. They're doing the same thing.
That's not a bad idea, actually. Oh. Any more questions about our little microbes?
I'm sorry, having hogged the questions, I'm now going to have to run off because I'm supposed to have been at yoga 10 minutes ago, but it was too riveting to leave before now, so I am going to dash. I'm sorry.
Enjoy your yoga.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Susie.
Bye.
And then there were 9. Hello. Any questions?
Susie, what's butyrate? Butyrate?
Oh, butyrate. Oh gosh. You know, Shelley, I've gone completely blank.
Oh, don't worry, it's fine.
It's in coconut oil, isn't it?
Well, I was reading an article about how good it was as a sort of, you know, for your gut.
Yes, it is. It is good for your gut. And I know you find it in coconut oil, and it's one of those things that is helpful for your good gut flora, but I cannot off the top of my head for this minute think why.
Oh, don't worry, it's fine. I was just
yeah.
I was just
thank you for that though. Yes.
Sorry.
It's prebiotic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Well, there's different lists of foods to increase butyrate, like almond, apple, barley. Yeah.
Yeah, I will come back with that next week or in the email that I send out.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, it was very interesting.
Yes, thank you.
Take care. Take care. Speak
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susie.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Susie, take care.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Susie. Thank you.